face-to-face meetings has said, how do we play a bigger role? And in fact, most of the people we've spoken to have some sense already of how they could influence the system, or at least they see an opportunity to change the system they work in, whether it's in manufacturing or in the built environment, but don't have the connections and the support to be able to act on the change that they can see the opportunity for. So I know this is a very generic comment, but I think we have an incredible opportunity here to support people, whether they're new grads, at the early stage of their career, all the way through to very senior leaders, to connect with their peers more effectively, and feel that it is okay to step up and try and advocate for greater change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's...
Sorry, I might pipe in there. If you can hear me, I don't know. Yes.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, we can hear you.
Yeah.
So,
fantastic. Sorry, I dropped out before, and I think I caused all sorts of mayhem.
No, had it under control.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, I just thought, I mean, it's always tricky starting a conversation with what doesn't work now and what's wrong, because we can sort of spiral into doom and gloom. And it's really interesting to hear that you're already proposing answers, which I think is fantastic, because that's where we need to be looking. But I guess I would just say, in terms of having these 4 groups here today, from your perspectives, what is happening now to improve planning and construction industry? What actions can we take as planners, architects, builders, whether it's in our own businesses or in speaking to clients and consultants and colleagues? And I think one of the questions I come up with a lot in my work life is, what can members of the public do? So it's not even in a professional alignment sense, but it's just, how can we take action? I think everyone feels a lot of frustration about knowing what's ahead, but not knowing what we can do. So what can we do? Anyone want to kick off that discussion?
I'll weigh in on this one. I think we need to change the conversation around sustainability in the industry, where it's seen as an additional cost. It's seen as something that the industry generally in the mainstream wants to do as little of as possible. But we need to flip that around to talk about creating value. And we're doing that at a time where that is absolutely aligned with where the investment community is going around the world, around having to maintain their social license and say it's not all about money, it's actually about creating value, and that can be financial value as well as social value and ecological value. And we've got some great roadmaps in Australia for how we can move forward in that direction beyond zero emissions and the Million Jobs Plan, Climate Works and Decarbonisation Futures. That's really world-leading, efforts to show how we can design our economy differently so it's much more resilient. And it's really about creating incredible wealth. It's not all financial wealth, and it's not easy. It's actually quite hard, but it's really exciting. And we can do a great job of that in Australia. And I think those are the conversations we need to have more courage to bring into the project team meetings, to take to organisations who have actually signed up to this mission and haven't quite translated that down to the ground yet. We need to see perhaps more braver, bolder discussions in each of our spheres of work.
I just wanted to, I completely agree with what Chris just said, but also that I think we're getting to a point where there will be no choice, because actually organisations who don't value things other than monetary wealth will not attract the talent that they need. And we'll start to see people being more selective about the organisations they want to invest in, whether that's a financial investment or whether it's investment of time or whatever that investment is. People want to be part of something that means something. And we're seeing that more and more.
From a builder's standpoint, the action that we need as builders, and why the intention of Builders Declare is we need to be skilled. I mean, you architects can design the most amazing, high-performing home, architects and engineers and planners, but I mean, if the people on the ground don't have the knowledge and expertise to execute, there's no point. I mean, it is a key link in the chain. We've all got to work. work in unison to make that happen. So the upskilling as a real actionable item for builders is much needed.
So I guess then a question becomes, we want to make change, we want to make it happen somehow. There are ways of achieving it now. But what is that vision? What do our future cities, buildings, houses look like? What should we be aiming for and what's possible? I'm saying this, I guess, to some degree in the context of the home builder scheme that was just announced as a stimulus package, but basically promotes, you know, generic bulk construction at the peripheral of all of our cities and further expansion out into, you know, farmland zoned. It's sort of a question of, if we see the true leadership, economic stimulus packages that are just driving construction that isn't aiming at a future vision, that doesn't know what is a better way to build. And I always think the perspective, what I tell my clients is what we are building will be around in 2050. So we actually have to build that future world right now. So maybe someone out there, perhaps one of the planners, what will our future cities, buildings and houses look like?
Great question, Zoe. And, you know, from the previous question, there's a lot of positivity, and I agree powers have power wholeheartedly, both from individual and organizational level. But to answer your question, Zoe, what cities, we actually have the policies in place right now. As per this, you know, initial comments, we have all the good plans. It's about how we implement those plans. So currently we have something called the 20-minute neighborhood concept that speaks of a compact city where you're able to access everything via walking, active transportation, or other public transportation in a very close area. And, you know, from a carbon point of view, that trains into a lot of positives, both from an operational efficiency of buildings and also private transportation, and also so that's one thing, but also the conversation needs to also be regionally. You know, all these conversations we're having is in urban centers, but Australia is a very big place. So how can we also decentralize? How can we support satellite cities, you know, between our major urban centers? So I think another kind of way to look at that is rail. You know, we've been talking about rail, fast rail, similar in Japan and Australia since the 80s. So that's another conversation. You know, if we're able to easily, you know, if you go to Switzerland, it has the best regional transportation in the world, you know, where you can easily access city centers conveniently. So I think it's a conversation of, you know, what is the Australian dream? Does it involve having a house with a 2-picket fence on the periphery with cars, or does it involve living more compactly and, you know, using the roads as a public space, because it's a public space. So I think it's about culturally what is the Australian dream, and whether practitioners like ourselves are in a position to generate social currency and get buying currency for what this dream should look like. I think that's what's the Australian dream. That's the main question.
Can I just throw in something there? I have to add, last year I was in Berlin and walking the city, obviously that got destroyed in World War II. And I did not pass, I walked the city for 3 days and did not pass a single dwelling home. It was all you know, up high rises. Have we got it totally wrong? Like, I mean, nobody wants to live in a, you know, shoebox, I know, but how do we, what are the goals to actually achieve a sustainable future? And yeah, have we got it wrong? Is the Australian dream of the half acre, well, I think that's gone, but of the land in the suburbs, is that over, and is that unattainable for a sustainable future?
That's a great question. I think one of the challenges that we face is around both design and construction quality. if you think around a lot of the developments in any of the kind of suburbs that are around at the moment, a lot of development has been done to, enrich the profitability of a developer who puts things out. When it comes down to what the actual built quality is, how well a building is, its passive design is, how well it's insulated, how airtight that building is, the forms of construction that are being done, that's an area that we are failing miserably in. And I think there's an awful lot of folk who are sitting at home in Victoria who are actually experiencing that if they don't have the bloody heating system cranked up to the max most of the time, they freeze their butts off. And I think if you wanted something really, I mean, I'm loving the conversation, right, going from everything from, how we plan our cities to where things are, the transport systems. I think if we were going to focus on something that's actually tangible and within the power of this group, it's perhaps that we would focus on designing buildings that are great for people to go and occupy and that are comfortable to be in. Because most Australians, if you go and ask most people who've come from overseas about their first experience in coming to Victoria, the answer will be, what the hell's with the bloody buildings? How come they're so cold? And I think it's an area of massive focus that planners have a role in actually ensuring that, things are specified and that there's good passive design and that things take these things seriously. Because my experience of dealing with a lot of councils in the area, in different areas, is they don't push it particularly hard, and we end up with very, very poor quality buildings. And I think that both designed and then because they're built to a price, oftentimes the actual build quality isn't great. And
good comments, Jeff. Thank you for that. I might just handball to Stefan now, just to talk about that notion of what should we be aspiring to as a home, I guess, or as a vision of Australian way of living. So is it a high-rise apartment? Is it a small footprint home close to its neighbours? Is it something on the city fringe? Stefan, what do you think? I know you've designed a lot of houses in different locations. What have you drawn on?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, I think I kind of disagree with Simon that we sort of got it wrong in Australia. I mean, one nice thing about this planet is that it's very diverse. And if you want to live in a high-rise building in Berlin, it's just as beautiful as living in a suburban house in Berlin, or it can be just as beautiful as a suburban house in Berlin. So there is no, one fits all. There shouldn't be a one fits all approach. So I think that's the first thing. And obviously one of the attractions of Australia is that it's, that you can build your own home, which is something that we can also value. It's more a matter of, and sort of following on from what Jeff is saying, it's just a matter of how we build it. So how we design and we build it. But a few things were mentioned earlier. For example, money is an interesting, or cost is an interesting one too. Like if you do a cost risk analysis of having children, you wouldn't do it,
Yeah.
like too expensive. A lot of headaches, you're always time poor, you're stressed out, and then they may not turn out as well as you're hoping to. So why do you have children? Because it brings you happiness, So, but, that is the question, for example, when you design a home, why do you have a home? What's the purpose of a home? And I'm not saying yes, you should do this, you should do that, or whatever. I think it's a matter, to me, the important thing is to rephrasing, redefining, what a home is. And obviously, we had a very interesting webinar last week on regenerative design that looks at, if you design a building, let's say if you start with a building that's fundamentally detrimental to our environment, should actually turn around and should make a positive contribution to our environment, then this is where we should start, if how do you define it, but I think that's sort of a starting point. And if it increases the elephant population in Botswana, that's great, and whatever, if it reduces carbon emissions, etc. So there are a lot of things, but I think it's rephrasing values. I think, yeah, Jeremy.
I mean, that is exactly the idea of creating a home that was actually a net positive. That's become so much easier recently with the cost of solar panels coming down, and we find quite a lot of our homes are actually achieving that carbon positive on a reasonably small system. Most homes, once you've designed them well, you've built them well, put in heating and cooling, which is low, efficient at what they do, and got the clients to stock them with appliances which are on the higher star side. Most homes that most people who've come to us, we've found that a system of 5 kilowatts or around about there is enough to break even. And a 5 kilowatt photovoltaic system these days is running at about $2,900, $3,000 or so forth. So it's not a big expense. And if you do that, if you're breaking even, the average bill for a gas and electricity combined fuel bill in Victoria, at least where I operate, is around about $2,500, $2,500 to $3,000. So effectively, you still got your connection fees that you pay, but effectively you're saving around about $2,000 a year on that, which gives payback somewhere between 10 and 20 years on the extra cost that it is up front. So there's no doubt with energy efficiency that over time, it's by far the most effective thing, or one of the most effective things that we can do to improve costs and improve the efficiency in the economy. But sometimes you've got to moderate it over a number of years when you're looking at the payoffs to make it work. And that's maybe where planners and policymakers need to get on board to help ease people across the initial extra so they can reap the benefits downwind.
Multi-res development just really want to quickly make this point. If we think about multi-res development in Australia, who is building it? They're not the end users of the product. So why would they put the money up front? Unless, of course, they can then get a better value, a better return on investment, and more profit. But in most cases, there's some tinkering around the edges in a lot of circumstances that can happen in this multi-res. But generally, with the exception of sort of your Nightingales or your Assemble that are sort of entering into this more social enterprise form of multi-res development, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody who's got a piece of land, or they're a development consultant working for someone who already owns that piece of land, and they'll leave it at the end and not so concerned about reputational damage. There are ways around that, and we see that all the time in Australia. And I think that motivation behind multi-res development needs to be really shifted, and that comes, as you've just said, Jeremy, back to taxation reform. It comes back to larger policy platforms that exist to ensure that the person that's motivated to capture development rights that exist on their land are motivated with the right regulations in place to ensure that the end user of that product is also left with a good quality housing product that they can actually afford to live in.
I think we will start to see that change, though.
Pardon?
We're already starting to see that change, and I think that if we can focus on where there is change and where actually developments are looking at health of the community and of the users, and I kind of liked what Stefan was saying about the role of a home, because it's not just our shelter, it's not just to have a roof over our heads. Like, every single building that's designed informs the way that people behave and changes the way that people interact with each other, and so every building has an influence around it, and there's so much we can do as designers. We're basically, every time we design something, are saying how we want the world to be. So it's a huge opportunity to shape the future and to build communities rather than pulling them apart. I think social housing is an area where I see there's huge opportunity. Those who are most vulnerable within our societies are those who are most in need of the types of things that we're talking about. I mean, all of these emergencies that we're addressing, they're not just about greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, if we've not seen that this year, then I don't know what we have seen. It's about our society and the gaps and the disparity of wealth, and that's where we can have real influence. So yeah, I just liked what Stefan was saying, and I think a lot of the build to rent projects that we're starting to see emerge are again different models where actually the developer is going to be maintaining and owning that asset into the long term, and so we're actually seeing that those community objectives are set early, and they're foundational for the designs of those apartments, whether it's around energy or whether it's around community benefits and social outcomes. That's really driving that.
Can I butt in for a minute? Sorry, one moment, and then I'm just aware of the time, so maybe just a quick comment, and we'll do one more round and then pass it over to the audience to ask some questions.
Well, I'd make a quick comment. I think we need to change the way we design and construct. One of the really challenging things that I find is the client asks for a Green Star rating, and so it becomes a checklist, becomes a code kind of approach. Just give me let's chase the points. Let's tick it off. We're done. Tell you what, that does not inspire anybody in the room. We can do so much better. Doesn't mean we don't want to get a Green Star rating. That's fantastic. The investors want to see that. It's a very important benchmark. But let's have workshops at the beginning to open up the conversation. How do we create value here? What is the community looking for? What's the developer need? What's the local council trying to achieve? How can we collaborate and innovate and be a little bolder? And tell you what, you're going to excite everybody there, particularly the younger professionals, young architects, young engineers. A lot of them are very disillusioned right now. That's why they're part of these movements. They really want to see change. It's their future that we're going to be impacting. So let's change the way we use a more integrated systems-based approach to come together and to promote a lot more innovative thinking, and we'll all get more excited and achieve a whole lot more.
Thank you, Chris. That is perfect, because I was just going to say, what can we do now? How can we start to make positive change? And I think you've just addressed that very nicely there. And now I'm aware we're a couple of minutes off supposedly the conclusion of this, and we did want to open it up for some audience.
I'm a homeowner, and I've just spent 12 years retrofitting a 1974 house to take it from a 2-star to a 7-star. It was never well aligned on the block. It was never well designed. It was never well built. And from planning to design, architecture to building was never done very well. So is there an opportunity that you can see to have alignment with metrics and incentives so that the builders and developers are not there to make a quick buck, build a shitty building, get it out quick, get it onto the market, and then the end users are left with a whole heap of crap, which is going to cost a lot of money to run for the rest of their life. So it's really design signals intent. What is the shared intent from this system to try and provide health and livability in whatever the end building is? Is there a way to align those parts of the system? That's my very small but big question.
From my project experience, whilst it's not sort of on a domestic home renovation or build or design, I think it's really important that a shared intent across a multidisciplinary team with the client is set up as your first step, so that you actually have a touchstone to keep referring back to in terms of what your primary driver is and purpose behind the project, to tie everyone along.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Sorry.
I would say a lot of it comes down to confidence of the different practitioners. What I mean by that is architects and designers, they need to come out of their courses confident that they can do passive solar design and energy efficient design. Builders confident that they understand how the systems go together, how to do the installation, what is a U value in a window, what's a solar heat gain coefficient, when they're choosing a heater, what does coefficient of performance mean, and it's getting that information through to the practitioners. And also, I think it's also about getting desire into the general public so that they are asking for higher standards. And one thing that I'm really happy about, and I hope all of the groups really push, is the whole of house initiatives that's happening at the moment with the green building, trying to get a system where all new homes have to be 7 stars, and they also have to look at the heaters that they're putting in, the hot water systems, pool pumps, lighting, anything under the construction code has to go in, and that calculated, and then a solar, they also look at the amount of solar panels that they would need to put on to offset that. So, I mean, that's a really great idea if it gets through, but that's the sort of thing that's coming. So there's no way that going forwards, we as Australia won't have to address this. We have international commitments, 40% reduction by 2030, Paris agreements, zero, just carbon neutral by 2050. So these things are coming, but there's a lot of education that's going to need to happen so that everyone has the confidence to achieve it.
And I think as part of that, we really need to look at how we support local governments who are showing the most leadership of any level of government in Australia. And there's 8 million people in Australia that live in a municipality that's declared a climate emergency. So they're another very important constituency here. And they're at the moment trying to work out how they change planning requirements to drive carbon neutral homes and help people live happy and healthy lives within the limits of one planet. So there's some really exciting things going, but there are real challenges there where they feel that they can't control, the energy efficiency of buildings in their own precincts, but they are really trying to show a lot of leadership. So I think all of our Declare movements can really step up and work with them to drive some really positive change.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was going to say, I mean, one thing I really like about the Declare movement is that it's inclusive, so, and obviously we started off with, identifying the problem, and then Zoe nicely shifted it towards what can we do. So I think that's a good thing about the Declare movement. You need allies, and you can find allies, sort of, and Simon, I don't want to obviously promise you a job, but obviously, if you're looking for good builders, then you may actually go to essentially, to the Builders Declare, and then see, who has the same conditions that I have, and who is the same. What consultant can I use, sort of to fit in with our aspirations? So I think it's important to find the right allies. To find the right allies, and obviously the Declare platform is a very good one for that purpose.
That's exactly right. To Kathleen's point, I mean, architects have a lot of control, the builders they select. Obviously, starting Builders Declare, it's a call to arms for all builders. Anyone here that knows any builders, get them on board. And it's an opportunity. Who's going to step up as a builder and start building better homes? Simple as that. Start being really conscious about what we do. Leave it there.
Very good.
Were there any other questions, Victoria, that you may have had in the chat box?
Yeah, there are, Zoe. Let me just pull one up for you. Had a few actually, which is great. This last one here, what Australian standards would you like to see change to have a greater impact to build a better performing home? If we have to build better base standards, will this be a big step or just a small step?
Maybe I'll put in my 5 cents before everybody else. I'd like to see post-construction evaluation, and that's if we manage to do that, and if you could make this mandatory, then we would actually, that would be a huge step forward. I mean, we got obviously we got quite a few systems in place, but it's never, you know, they have not proven yet that they're going to reduce carbon emissions. So post-construction evaluation has to be mandatory. That'd be my desire.
I might sneak in there, Stefan, as well, and just add to that. I think also life cycle costing and energy use. So for instance, I mentioned before, I've just been studying the Passive House course, and just by designing a more airtight, carefully constructed building up front can reduce your operational energy use and costs 90%. So if you think of that in terms of social housing, in terms of property as a place to live rather than a speculative investment, you're actually making a massive change in the way houses, and I'm a residential architect, the way houses are built, designed and executed in Australia as a norm.
And I'm going to throw something in there. I think we have to have an element of nature-based solutions in there. We've got serious problems with heat island effect. Water is one of the biggest issues we have. Simple initiatives should be standard practice. Native planting, encouraging biodiversity, looking at natural solutions for water, really need to be prioritized up the list. I know energy is important, but there are a whole raft of other things that need to get up to the top of that list there. So, yeah.
So requirements for car parking. So at the moment, a home with more than 2 bedrooms must provide 2 car parking spaces unless they seek a waiver to reduce that. That then becomes political and it becomes a challenge. People avoid that process of wanting to reduce their requirement for car parking, which those studies that set the minimum limits of the minimum requirements of how much car parking we need to provide were done on the 1960s based off very unscientific science that are very outdated now, and that does impact the way we see medium to high density housing built in Australia. Also, I think building separation standards, if we're thinking more about multi-res and getting natural light into buildings, are a really big one that's in Victoria specifically. Sydney's got better standards associated with that, and to Claire's point, if we're thinking about at the planning stage, if we think about the ecological results that we want to see first, and then think about the building second, and the planning system I see has a real role there. And if I could just, one more thing, like I think planners are told to make decisions and assess things that we don't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily have to make decisions on. So we've developed this very 2-pronged process between planning approvals and building approvals. But if we focus the planning on the spatial components and getting that envelope right and the environmental components right, the architects and builders can worry about the actual built form component and specifically, and sort of speed up that process. And to Kathleen's point, you could streamline it where planning exists in a strategic realm, but not necessarily in that statutory realm where we know we end up with issues associated with neighbourhood character and whatnot. So that's me.
I'd like to close the gap between the house energy rating and the final built product. And I do that by changing the Building Act so that there's one more building inspection, and that's for insulation stage. So before the plaster comes out, and just eyeballs it and check the right thing goes in. And I'd also like to see at the end of the process a blower door test. And it doesn't have to be down to Passive House standard, but even 5 air changes now would be, or even 10 air changes now would be something, and we could slowly ratchet that up. But it would make builders extremely concerned that they could fail on the final hurdle, and so therefore no gaps and cracks, and that they pass that on to their contractors, so that the plumber knows if he makes a hole through the section, he fixes it.
I think one of the things we need to be careful of, there's a lot of, I see some of the questions coming up, real focus on building envelopes and getting the performance right. It won't be enough. I'm sorry, everybody, that will not avert the climate emergency. We actually need to look at regenerative solutions, building capacity for big changes. And I'll give you a perfect example. Schools. So we need to look at the co-benefits. Yeah, have a high-performance building, but we need to be teaching eco-literacy. We need to be changing school communities. We need to look at strategic acupuncture points in the industry to upskill people, to drive change, to shift minds. So it can't be just about the building. It's actually about the ripples of change that we create that consider all of the other living systems that we're part of, so the watersheds as well, the flows of materials. So as though it's great, we really want to do, produce world-class energy efficient buildings in Australia, it won't be enough. And so we have to lift the ability of our industry to do more complex things. It's going to be hard, but there's a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of other organisations trying to do the right thing, and they need our help. And I think at Engineers Declare that we see that as part of our roles, amplifying what they're doing, not replacing it. So I know that's sort of, broad comment, but that's where we have to go as
it's really valuable, Chris, and I think the focus on energy is a very narrow perspective on actually what we're looking at. And as grids shift, perhaps not in Australia, but across most of the world, grids are trying to shift to renewable energy. There will be less of a requirement on looking at energy on individual houses if that energy is coming from renewable sources. So it's an interesting one, really. And yeah, there's a lot of other areas where we could push our energy.
Well, I think part of the Declare notion across basically all four movements here tonight is that of awareness and advocacy and education, which I think is one of the main reasons that we're all here having a chat with an audience, whether we can see them or not. So I think I might just ask Victoria if there's one other question that she might read out, and we're already over time, but I think it's a good discussion. So Victoria, was there one more question in the chat box that you'd like to read out? And we might just have a response and then we'll call it a night almost.
There's been lots of great chat, and so I'm just trying to see if I can find that perfect kind of last question to finish everything up. I guess there's one here. Do you support mandatory pressure testing and thermal photos of finished buildings as a way of proving the buildings were insulated and airtight?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, obviously, Jeremy already touched on this, and I think most of us probably, well, I won't speak for the others, but I would certainly support that. And I'd say most builders, engineers, planners, and architects would sort of, would agree that this is, something that can easily become mandatory. So, and obviously, there's a small hurdle to climb, but you fail once and then you learn from this, and that'll raise the standards very easily, definitely.
Any other comments from the panelists on that final question?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. That's probably the final question. But,
nice background there, Roland, as well.
Yeah,
well,
I think maybe I like to sort of maybe follow on from what Chris was saying earlier. We do need to sort of, or also what you were saying, Zoe, obviously we talked about advocacy or mentioned advocacy. I think it's very important that, that as experts, in our fields, we have a role to play as advocates, and obviously us as architects, speaking for myself, obviously, our role is to design a building that can be used sustainably, and sometimes, and I'm going back to children, sometimes it takes years, I mean, my own house works on airflow, sort of how airflow works, and it requires opening and closing doors at the right time. And it took me a little bit of time to teach my children this, but, but obviously, they're now equipped to, to pass it on to their children, and obviously they are fully aware of the environmental impact of their lifestyle, of their lives. So, and I think that's something that we all can do, and that everybody can do in their profession, advocacy.
I agree. I mean, I'm a young practitioner. I mean, I don't even have a degree yet, but for me, it's about being positive and seeing that we share so much in common as a collective. And also, I guess, trying to understand how each practitioner work in the different environments of constraints in politics, society. I guess understanding and breaking down those barriers And I think that's also very important, because there's a lot of silo thinking, or we have, engineers might have perceptions of planners or vice versa, or but we share so much in common around, being a declarer on the current climate and biodiversity. So I think it's about exploiting that, capitalizing on that shared interest in common, and also, building, a culture, a new lineage of culture around what it means to live in Melbourne or regional Australia. What does that mean, and how can we translate it into meaningful change, real change, tangible change? And I'm very excited for the next decade or so.
Thank you, Roland. And I think that's a fantastic place to wrap up the discussion. From my own point of view, and as a signatory of a Declare movement, I see this as, first of all, I guess, a very intimidating and scary time, because I think we're all aware of what lies ahead if there isn't change and if there isn't collective action. But I think it's also, we're at the point now that we must act, or we might as well say goodbye. So I think for me, there is huge hope and huge optimism that we actually step up, speak out, and come together really to make the future that we want. So I'd like to thank you all very much for standing up and speaking out. And I think this has been a fantastic discussion, and hopefully the first of many to come. And I'd like to say thank you as well to Open House Melbourne for letting us talk on your special weekend, or just after the weekend as well. So much appreciated to give us a platform to raise awareness and education as well. And thank you to everyone out there who's put the time aside as well to listen in and hear some of the perspectives of this amazing group of professionals here as well. So thank you again. And on that note, I'd like to say good afternoon, good evening, and see you next time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank
Thank you.
you.